Well, hey there, and welcome to Wedding Planning Simplified. I hope you're enjoying this beautiful day that we're having here where I am in London, Ontario. I'm Amy, and I'm a wedding planner and educator here in town. We serve all kinds of busy professionals who are planning their weddings and are feeling overwhelmed or stressed and looking for some support to get through the wedding planning, hopefully with their sanity intact and still in love with their partner, excited about their wedding day. So we have launched into busy wedding season around here. We have weddings every weekend between now and the end of October. Sometimes we have one, sometimes we have five. So it's going to be a very busy summer, but I do like to touch base with you on Sundays as often as possible so that we can help you to alleviate some of your wedding planning stress, hopefully. So as always, reach out if you need help, if you have questions, Amy at unmistakably.you.com, or you can send us a private message through Facebook. If you're joining us, as you do every week, thank you and welcome back. If you're catching us on the replay, hi, thanks for watching. And if you're new to the group, welcome and congratulations on your upcoming wedding. We are so excited for you. We are this month handling some last minute details, and these videos probably will be a little bit more helpful to those of you who are getting married in the next month or two or three. If you've got a wedding coming up this season, hopefully this is helpful to you. Or if you are planning for your wedding in the future, keep some notes, come back to this. All of our videos are archived forever and ever and ever. So if you can find it, it'll still be here. Or as always, send us questions. So today we're going to talk about some details to confirm in the 3 months prior to the wedding. So presumably at this point, you've done all of your planning, you've booked all of your vendors, the majority of your major things are ticked off of your list. And then depending on the length of time that you've been planning, sometimes there's a lull. So you book all of your vendors up front, and then you kind of sit around and twiddle your thumbs with nothing really to do for a while. And then the 3 months before the wedding hit, and holy cow, is there a lot on your plate. So we have a couple of general guidelines to hopefully help you navigate those last 3 months and again, keep that sanity intact. And if we can assist with anything in those last couple of months, that's usually when we stop in and we do our check-ins with our day of coordination clients. And we know that that's ramping up at that point. So make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Make sure that you're setting out a plan so that you are not procrastinating and leaving everything till the end, because it will just stress you out more in the week before your wedding. And that's the time when you need the least stress so that you can be relaxing, taking care of yourself, and really enjoying celebrating with your friends and your guests on that wedding day. So make sure that you're on top of things. And if you're taking notes, you can start with your first heading, which is going to be 3 months out. So if you are 3 months away from your wedding, generally speaking, anywhere in that series of 8 to 12 weeks, you're going to presumably be sending out your invitations. 8 to 12 weeks in advance is the time at which those typically go out. So you'll send out your invitations, and we would advise you to set an RSVP deadline of about a month before the wedding, because that's going to give you enough time to follow up with any guests who haven't returned your RSVP and get their answers before you're going to need to submit those final numbers to your caterer. So you're going to send out your invites, and then I'm going to advise you to think about purchasing some gifts. So those could be gifts for your wedding party. It's traditional to give a gift to everyone who has stood up with you. This is kind of a symbol of your appreciation. We all know it's expensive to be a bridesmaid or a groomsman. You're looking at not only the purchase of the dress or the rental of the tux or the hair and the makeup and the bachelorette and the showers and the gifts that they're giving you and possible travel expenses and that kind of thing. So this is really a symbolic gesture. We generally see people spending between $50 to $100 per bridesmaid or groomsman. So you might want to look at purchasing those now. You also might want to look at guest favors if that's something that you've chosen to do. About 3 months out is a good time to do that. If you're ordering custom chocolates or cookies or anything engraved, it's a good time to do that about 3 months out so that your provider has enough time to turn around the order. And you might also be looking at gifts from you to each other. And that is something that we see a lot of our couples do, but certainly not all of them. We know that weddings are very expensive. And so sometimes this is something that can get cut out. And if you're doing gifts to each other, they certainly don't have to be extravagant. I actually gave my husband a book that was a sort of a template book that I filled in. It gave me prompts and then I completed the prompts, and it was not expensive, but it was meaningful, or at least I think it was meaningful. He might tell you it wasn't. So look after gifts 3 months before the wedding. And then you're going to want to finalize your floral order. Now, this isn't necessarily final. You'll want to talk to your florist about the latest date that you can make changes. But particularly right now, we're dealing with some floral shortages and supply issues, like in many industries. So you'll want to make sure that you've nailed down the specific kinds of flowers that your florist is going to be able to get, as well as a general idea of numbers. By 3 months prior to the wedding, you should have a really solid handle on how many bouquets you need. So you'll talk about what's going to be in those and the size and shape of them. You'll talk about corsages and boutonnieres. So these can be boutonnieres for groom, for wedding party, for dads, for grandpas, corsages for moms, grandmas, any special women in the wedding, whether they're MCs or whether they're readers. Really kind of, there's no rule on who gets a corsage and who doesn't, or who gets a boutonniere and who doesn't, but you'll want to confirm how many you need, as well as particularly with corsages, whether they are a wrist corsage, which is nice because it's not dependent on the fabric of what the woman is wearing. When we do pin-on corsages, sometimes it's a little bit tricky, especially if grandma has, like a gauzy, flimsy kind of a dress on that doesn't have a really sturdy lapel to pin to. I'm often fishing for grandma's bra strap, trying to get a pin through there and trying to figure out a way to make it look nice. Which is why if you're doing a shoulder corsage, perhaps ask your florist if magnets are an option. But wrist generally is the easiest if you're giving those to special women on your day. You'll always want to think about number of centerpieces as well. Now, this is kind of dependent, it's very dependent on your guest count. And so you can't really finalize your centerpieces until you've finalized your seating plan. And that's why I say you'll want to talk to your florist about when is the sort of cutoff date for dropping centerpieces if need be, or adding centerpieces if need be. You'll probably find that you have a pretty decent idea of how many tables you'll have, but then especially now with COVID, we're seeing a lot of last minute cancellations as people are coming down with COVID and unable to attend the wedding. So you'll want to know when that cutoff is, and it'll most likely be 4 to 6 weeks before the wedding. So if you do have guests who are dropping out because of COVID and you end up actually losing an entire table of guests, you can certainly repurpose that centerpiece on an auxiliary table, on a guest book table, on a welcome table, maybe on the bar if there's space. So if your florals come in, there's always lots of places you can use extras if you have had to finalize prior to that date. You'll also want to think about tables, centerpieces for those auxiliary tables. Maybe you're doing some flowers on your guest book or your gift table. Maybe you've got a favor table. Maybe you've got a memorial table that you might want to add some floral decor to. And then think about your ceremony flowers as well, whether you're doing something on an arbor or a gazebo, or if you have altar arrangements, if you're doing something down your chairs or pews, down the sides of your aisle. So finalize all of those things within about 3 months, but then know that there is going to be an extended cutoff date with most florists where you might be able to make some changes up to 6 to 8 weeks before the wedding. Now, here in Ontario, you can obtain a marriage license within 90 days of the wedding. So I would advise doing that sooner than later. You can get it out of the way. Currently, to my knowledge, most municipalities are doing this by appointment. You used to be able to just walk into City Hall and get a marriage license in a larger center, but currently most are doing it by appointment due to COVID. So 3 months before, lots of things to think about. There are other things, of course, on your radar, and you're constantly prepping for what comes next. So once you get to 2 months before the wedding, this is where things are, again, going to start to ramp up a little bit more with regard especially to your appearance on the day of the wedding. So generally, we'd recommend doing your hair and makeup trials within about 2 months of the wedding. The reason you don't want to do these super duper early is because you want your skin and your hair to be as close as possible to the condition and length that they will be on the actual wedding day. So as we know, if you're exposed to the sun at all, that can change your skin tone a little bit. Your hair grows every day. And so if you have a trial months before and you're still growing your hair, all of a sudden your hairdresser has a lot more to work with on the day. So booking those trials within about 2 months prior to the wedding is ideal. You're also going to reserve your week of spa services. So make sure that you get an optimal time booked in with your esthetician for your mani, pedi. Any facials that you're doing, we would generally recommend that you do about a week before, especially if you've never had a facial. Do not do it in the couple of days before the wedding. You'll want to know how your skin reacts. So when you're booking those things, just be a little bit mindful that mani-pedis are going to be probably the day before, but any facial or skin treatments are going to be a little bit earlier than that. Then you'll want to think a couple of months before about starting to finalize your ceremony details. So you'll probably have a meeting with your officiant to talk about the sections of the ceremony. If it's an officiant that you don't have a personal relationship with, they'll probably want to gather some elements of your story so that they can make it a little bit more personal and a little bit more you for you and your guests. So somewhere in that 2 months, 4 to 8 weeks before the wedding, you'll likely end up doing that. You'll also want to firm up a rehearsal time if you're doing a ceremony rehearsal. Some venues won't allow you to do this until closer to the wedding because there's the possibility that they may book another event. So usually that happens a couple of months to a month before the wedding. With regard to your rehearsal, you'll also want to think about booking a rehearsal dinner and communicating that with all of your wedding party. Then you'll think about your attire. So if there are dresses or suits or multiples of both involved, you'll want to start booking fittings. And we don't want to do those again too early before the wedding because if your body happens to change, depending on your stress level or your activity level or your diet, you want to make sure that your attire is going to fit the you that is going to appear on your wedding day. So make sure that you have, before you book your attire fittings, your undergarments that you're going to wear on the day, as well as your shoes that you're going to wear on the day. It's a good idea to have some jewelry as well, not that it affects the fit of anything, but so that you can get the overall look. So making sure that those are booked, generally starting about 2 months out, and then you'll want to have a final fitting if we're talking about a wedding dress within a couple of weeks before the wedding. You'll also want to think about where you're going to store that dress after you pick it up for alterations. Sometimes they'll save it for you until the day before the wedding. They'll steam it out for you. Sometimes you need to store it at home, in which case you're going to want to be careful of a couple of things. One, that your significant other doesn't see it. Two, that it's kept in a clean, dry space with no access to pets of any kind. We have horror stories about dogs and dresses that I'll tell you on another day. And three, that it is able to, if it's a dress, if it's able to be sort of allowed to poof out of the bag. So don't keep your wedding dress stuck in a closet in a tight, crammed into a tight garment bag. If you have a male component to your wedding party and they are renting suits, generally we're going to pick those up about a couple of days before the wedding. So we'll talk about that next week when we talk about those final day of details. Now, I would also recommend at a couple of months prior to the wedding that you start designing your day of stationery. So a lot of this can't be finalized until you have your RSVPs back and your seating chart finished, but you can start designing them. And whether that's having a stationer working on them or if you're designing through somewhere online, you'll want to start designing those things so that you can just plug in those final details in the month before the wedding and have them printed a couple of weeks out. I did a wedding recently where they had printed the seating chart a couple of months in advance, and they actually had to print labels and stickies and put them over guests who had been switched out or who were no longer able to come. So to keep things as neat and clean and professional looking as possible, we want to try and make sure that we get that stationery designed early, but then not printed until a little bit closer to the wedding. So when I'm talking day of stationery, I'm talking about things like ceremony programs, if you're doing those, table numbers, seating chart, place cards, menu cards, any signage that you might be doing at the wedding, hashtags or bar signs or cards and gifts or that kind of thing. So get it designed so that you have lots of time, and then you can just adjust the details closer to the date. So that brings us to the period from about 4 weeks before, 2 to 4 weeks before. This is when you're going to finalize with your DJ or your musicians. Some DJs would prefer to meet 6 weeks before, so somewhere in that 2 to 4 to 6 week, depending on your DJ. If you have live musicians for any component of the day, if you have live music for your ceremony or a band, say for your reception, you'll want to make sure that you communicate with them a little bit earlier if you are asking them to learn specific music. So if you're asking for a song that's not in their repertoire, you'll need to finalize with them earlier. When you're sitting down with your musicians, you're going to want to finalize your ceremony music. So generally speaking, and I have lists for all of this. So if you need lists to guide you through the music choices, feel free to reach out. I can send those to you, or your DJ should be able to provide you with something similar. Maybe they even have an app where you can go in and fill things in. But for your ceremony, you're going to want to specify a genre, usually of prelude music. You don't have to specify every single song, but something for when guests are coming in and being seated. You'll need something potentially for seating of your moms if you're doing that. Then processional music. This is commonly either 1 or 2 songs, depending on the size of your wedding party. If you have a lot of attendants who are processing, you may want a separate song for them and then a different song for you. You may choose to just use one song for all of that. Then you'll want a signing of the register song, something for guests to listen to while you're signing the license. Then you'll want something for recessional. So as you're announced married, the crowd is probably clapping. It's usually an upbeat kind of happy sort of thing as you recess down the aisle. And depending on the culture or tradition or religion of your ceremony, there may be other musical components as well. There may be hymns that you'll need to include. There may be other special pieces of like chant or cantors. So you'll want to talk to your officiant about that if you're having a religious ceremony of any kind. Then you'll want to finalize your reception music. And again, for guidance, let me know, or a DJ can help you out here. Generally speaking, you'll want to talk about a genre for cocktail music. Then if you're doing a grand entrance into your reception space, you'll probably need something for that. We generally advise against choosing a separate piece of music for every person or couple who enters in the wedding party. It's just a lot for your DJ to manage. Switching between song and song and song and song also leaves some room for error. So making sure that if you are choosing multiple songs, you clear that with your DJ. Then you'll need music, presumably for first dances. Often there's a first couple dance. Sometimes there's a mother-son, father-daughter, depending on your family demographic and the way that you're setting things up. You'll need songs for those. You may need to choose a cake cutting song, depending on if you're cutting a cake. Dinner music is generally sort of just a genre. Again, it's usually background music, so you don't need to feel like you should dictate every single song there. And then sometimes you'll do a bouquet and garter toss, sometimes not. Sometimes there are special dances that you'll want to do throughout the night. Maybe you're doing a bridal party dance or an anniversary dance. Maybe you want to specify a song for the last dance of the night. All of that you'll want to communicate with your band or your DJ. And we also generally recommend that you come up with a short do not playlist. So this could be things like themey or kitschy songs like, Cha-Cha Slide or the Macarena or the Chicken Dance. You could come up with a specific artist that you don't want to hear, like No Black Eyed Peas at my wedding. And then we suggest that you come up with a short list again of things that you really would like to hear. This will help guide your DJ in terms of the style and genre that you like. But again, don't micromanage your DJ, because if you specify 40 songs that you must hear, that's your whole night. And now you've tied the DJ's hands in terms of being able to play to the crowd and being able to be flexible and fluid. And if something in particular is keeping the crowd on the dance floor, you're going to prevent your DJ from keeping that vibe going if you've said, no, I need to hear this, then this, then this, then this. In that case, you might as well just have a playlist as opposed to a professional musician or DJ. Also, about a month before, you'll need to follow up with any outstanding RSVPs. People are great, people are busy. So even though you've sent them all the things and you provided them with a stamped envelope or you gave them the RSVP email, they'll forget. So you will have to follow up with some guests. That's why I suggest making your RSVP deadline about a month before, because that's going to allow you the time to make some phone calls or send some emails to follow up with those delinquents who haven't RSVP'd. Once you do have all of your RSVPs in, you're going to need to communicate that with your venue. So different venues and caterers have different requests where that's concerned, but it's usually some kind of a spreadsheet that lists which guests are at which tables, which meal choices are at which tables, which allergies are at which tables, and of course, your final overall guest count. When you're communicating that, make sure that you're talking to your caterer or your venue about the number of vendors that you have, because in my opinion, vendors shouldn't be on the beverage package. So if you are paying an all-inclusive rate, then you're paying for food and a certain number of hours of open bar for your guests. Your vendors shouldn't be drinking. So in order to save a little bit of money, ask if they'll take the vendors off of the beverage package, because that's something that you shouldn't be paying for if it's not happening. You also want to communicate any children. If you have children in your guest count, usually they will provide a children's meal at a lower cost as well. You're also going to create your seating chart, and you're going to, if you're doing any rentals, you're going to want to solidify those and tweak numbers of chairs, numbers of tables, numbers of place settings if you're renting any tableware. So that all has to happen finally within the couple, the month, couple of weeks before the wedding. You'll have had an approximate quote, presumably from a rental company, where you said, I'm having 120 guests. And so you've reserved 120 chairs and 120 place settings. But then there's always a little bit of attrition. Usually rental places will allow you to reduce by a certain percentage. So if you're down to 110 from 120, within the month before the wedding, you should be able to remove those extra 10 chairs and place settings and not have to pay for those. Now, once we get to 2 weeks before, this is where things are getting busy. You are finalizing your itinerary, you're confirming with all your vendors, you're printing your day of stationery. You've got all of the details that have to be nailed down. And that is a topic for another day. So we are going to tackle your day of details next week. So catch me here, same time, same place, and I will hopefully be able to shed some light on things that are often overlooked in the week before the wedding, and give you some guidance on how to streamline things so that it goes as smoothly as possible on your wedding day. I also have a big free download for you next week. So make sure to tune in next week while we talk about day of details. Hopefully you found today helpful. If you got anything helpful out of this, or if you have any questions, please leave us a comment. We love to chat with you and see where you are in your own wedding plans. We hope that things are going smoothly for you, but if you do need some help, reach out, and we will see you here next week, same time, same place. I'm Amy. Enjoy your day, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.